The rain came softly that night, tapping like fingers on the window pane of the small yellow house at the end of Sycamore Lane. Inside, the faint smell of lavender soap lingered in the hallway, where a single mother moved quietly, carrying a folded pink blanket in one arm and a tiny bear in the other. Teresa Malone stood at her daughter's doorway, watching. Lily, just 6 years old, was already curled under the covers, her damp curls peeking from beneath the pillow. She looked like she was dreaming, even before sleep took her. "Did you brush your teeth?" Teresa whispered, stepping into the room. Lily nodded sleepily, then opened her arms. "Teddy," she said. Teresa smiled, tucking the soft toy into Lily's arms. "There you go, honey. He missed you. He likes when I talk to him," Lily mumbled. "Wants me to record secret things." Teresa leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Only happy secrets," she said gently. "Only sweet dreams tonight." The small recording button on the bear's tummy blinked red once, then faded. Teresa turned out the light. The house fell quiet. Outside, wind rustled the sycamores. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside, the only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator and the rain beating against the shingles. Teresa poured herself a cup of lukewarm tea and sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her hands. They were dry and cracked from dish soap and overuse. Parenting alone wasn't easy. Across from her, the empty chair still had a faint mark where Marcus used to sit. His presence had long since gone, but the arguments still echoed about custody, about money, about how to raise Lily. He hadn't seen their daughter in over a year, and that, in some twisted way, was a relief. A gust of wind shook the house, and something rattled. She turned her head sharply, but heard nothing else. Probably the window screen, she thought. Still, she checked the front door, locked, checked. Lily's room. Still asleep, Teddy tucked under her chin, thumb near her mouth. Teresa whispered, "Good night, baby," and closed the door. When she awoke, it was light. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, a blanket haphazardly over her legs. The rain had stopped, birds chirped, cars passed outside, a normal Thursday morning. She blinked the blur from her eyes, stretched, and made her way to the kitchen to start breakfast. A single cereal bowl, a spoon, and apple slices. She always made Lily's plate first. "Lily," she called softly. "Time to get up, sweet pea." No answer. She smiled and walked to the hallway. "Come on, or you'll be late for kindergarten." Still no answer. Teresa opened the bedroom door and stopped. The bed was empty. The blanket was pulled back neatly, as if someone had gently slid from beneath it. The teddy bear was gone from its usual place. The curtain danced from a breeze that didn't belong. The window was wide. Open. Her heartbeat slowed, then surged. "Lily," she called again, louder now, stepping into the room. The air was cold, too cold, and then she saw them. Tiny, muddy footprints on the wooden floor, leading from the bed toward the window. Not outside, just to the edge. They stopped abruptly, as if someone had lifted the child into the air. She staggered backward, her breath caught. Her knees buckled. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no, no." She ran out the front door in her slippers, shouting Lily's name. Scanning the yard, the driveway, the quiet street. Neighbors peeked from windows. Dogs barked. Someone called her name. "Teresa, what's going on?" She couldn't answer. The sirens came 20 minutes later, blue and red lights, reflected off the rain-slicked pavement as police cars lined the curb. Officers swarmed the house. A detective named Ian Crowley, tall, gried, authoritative, began asking calm, calculated questions. "When did you last see her? Was anything unusual last night? Could anyone have taken her?" Teresa couldn't think, couldn't breathe. She pointed to the window. It was closed. "I swear it was closed." "Was it locked?" I think so. I always lock it." "Is her father in town?" She hesitated. "No. Not that I know of." The detective made a note. Meanwhile, officers combed the backyard. A K9 unit sniffed for a scent. Crime scene. Tape went up. Neighbors were questioned. A female officer emerged from Lily's room, holding something in a clear evidence bag. The teddy bear, Ma'am, she said gently. We'll need to take this for analysis. It looks like there's some kind of voice recorder inside. Teresa stared at the bear, as if seeing it for the first time. It records? She asked, stunned. The officer nodded. There's a red button on the stomach. Might help us. She reached for it instinctively, but the officer pulled it back. I'm sorry, we'll return it once it's processed. Teresa didn't speak. Her lips trembled. Then she screamed. A deep guttural scream that tore through the hallway and out onto the street. Her knees hit the floor. Someone tried to hold her, but she shook them off. Where is she? She cried. Where's my baby? From behind the taped-off doorway, flashes lit the room. A camera clicked. By noon, reporters gathered on the sidewalk. Cameras rolled. A news anchor whispered solemnly into her mic. A 6-year-old girl vanished from her bed last night in this quiet suburban neighborhood. Far inside the police station, the bear sat sealed in a sterile bag. Its black eyes stared blankly, its red button blinked once, then faded. The bear's voice recorder was still in the lab, and Lily's bed sat untouched behind police tape. The small house on Sycamore Lane no longer felt like a home. It felt like evidence. Detective Ian Crowley returned to the scene the next morning, rain boots crunching the gravel as he walked the perimeter of the house again. Teresa stood nearby on the porch, arms folded tight against the cold. Her eyes were hollow from a sleepless night. Every question, every knock, every glance from neighbors burned like acid in her chest. Crowley tapped his notebook. No signs of forced entry. Window screen wasn't damaged. Muddy footprints, but no adult prints. No fingerprints that don't belong to the child or you. Teresa swallowed hard. So, someone cleaned up. Or someone who knew what they were doing. He looked over his shoulder at the small yard, the rows of identical houses, and then motioned to Officer Davis. Check with the neighbors again. Start across the street. It was Mrs. Winchell, a retired schoolteacher with a floral nightgown and binoculars by her kitchen window, who offered the first real lead. I couldn't sleep, she said, sipping weak coffee as Davis took notes. Storm was loud. Around 1:30, I looked outside and saw a man. Right over there, she pointed across the street, directly at the Malone house. What was he doing? Davis asked. Just standing, she said slowly. In the rain, no umbrella. He was watching the house. Gave me a chill, honestly. Can you describe him? Tall, dark, jacket? Couldn't see the face, but he wasn't just passing by. He stood there for a long time. 10, maybe 15 minutes. Officer Davis jotted down the time and description, then looked at the window again. The view of the Malone home was clear, even at night, especially if someone wanted to watch without being seen. Back at the house, Teresa sat on the edge of the couch, clutching a framed photo of Lily in both hands. Her thumb gently rubbed at the glass over her daughter's face, as if she could feel her skin through it. Crowley crouched across from her. Do you know anyone who might want to hurt you? Or Lily? Teresa didn't answer right away. Her voice, when it came, was brittle. Everyone loved her. He nodded, slowly. What about her father? The photo frame froze in her hands. Marcus and I. We're not in contact. He left when she was 5. He didn't even call last Christmas. Did he ever make threats? Her voice dropped to a whisper. There's a restraining order. Crowley's eyes narrowed slightly. Tell me about it. 2 years earlier, Teresa had filed for full custody after discovering Marcus had been drinking while watching Lily. More than once, she'd found her daughter sitting alone on the kitchen floor, eating crackers, while Marcus slept off. A 6-pack on the couch. The final straw came when Lily came home from one weekend visit with a bruised shoulder. She didn't want to talk about it, but Teresa could see it in her eyes. Fear. Marcus denied everything, said it was an accident. Claimed Teresa was manipulating Lily. The court disagreed. He lost custody and visitation. A restraining order followed after he showed up at her work, screaming outside the diner window until the police arrived. I haven't seen him in over a year, Teresa said, voice tight with pain. He said if I kept her from him, I'd regret it. Crowley stood and motioned to Davis. Find him. By noon, Marcus Malone's name was being quietly passed through law enforcement channels. 6-foot-2. Caucasian brown hair, 38. Former truck driver. Last known address was a rundown rental west of town. Neighbors said he hadn't lived there in months. Clara Monroe, a young local reporter with too much curiosity and too little patience, caught wind of the story by eavesdropping on police radio chatter. She stood across the street near a mailbox, scribbling into a notepad, observing Teresa through the window. From that angle, the single mother looked like a ghost, pacing from room to room with no direction, no plan, just panic. On repeat, Clara scribbled. Vanished child. Missing teddy bear. Suspicious ex. Lurker on Sycamore. It was a story waiting to explode. That evening, as the sun dipped behind grey clouds, Crowley returned once more to the Malone home with a printout in hand. We found Marcus. He's living out of a motel 20 minutes west. Teresa flinched. He claims he hasn't seen Lily since 1990. Says he didn't even know where you lived now. She stared at him. That's a lie. He showed up here once. Last fall, yelled outside the porch. I called the cops. Crowley frowned. We're pulling phone records. Motel manager says Marcus arrived 2 nights ago, alone, but what? He paid cash, and the room next to his was rented out that same night, to someone using a fake ID. Teresa's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the edge. Of the counter, you think? He took her. I don't know yet, Crowley said carefully. But it's possible someone else was involved. Or watching you. Someone who knew your routines. Teresa's eyes darted to the corner of the living room, where Lily always left her backpack. It was still there, untouched. Her voice cracked. You think I brought someone into this house? Who took her? No, Crowley said. But I think someone already knew this house. Outside, the night fell quietly over Sycamore Street. Porch lights flickered on. Behind closed curtains, neighbors whispered, not just about the missing girl, but about the mother. She was always so quiet, never saw the father around. Maybe there's more to her story than she lets on. Teresa sat by the window, watching the world turn against her. Her arms folded across her chest, trying to contain a cold that had nothing to do with whether. Then she saw him, a man, across the street, standing motionless near a lamppost. Her breath caught in her throat. She rose, heart pounding. But the moment she stepped outside, he was gone. The knock on the motel door came just after 7 a.m. Detective Crowley stood with 2 uniformed officers outside room 207 at the Hillcrest Motor in a dim, aging motel. Clinging to the outskirts of town, the curtains were closed, lights off, a flicker of movement behind the peephole, then a voice. What? Marcus Malone? Crowley asked flatly. Silence. Then the door opened slowly. Marcus stood shirtless, eyes bloodshot, hair wild, a towel barely wrapped around his waist. His body reeked of alcohol and sweat. What do you want? He muttered. Crowley didn't waste time. You're coming with us. The interrogation room smelled of burnt coffee and stale air. Marcus sat hunched over, chewing at a torn fingernail, eyes darting to the one-way mirror. Across the table, Crowley placed a photo of Lily in front of him. She's gone, he said. Vanished from her bed 3 nights ago. Marcus stared at the photo a long time. She's older now, he finally muttered. She was 6 when she disappeared. You haven't seen her in a year, right? Marcus nodded, tight-jawed. Because of her, Teresa poisoned that kid against me. Where were you the night Lily disappeared? Driving. I do long-haul pickups now. Delivery jobs, off the books. I was on I-90 heading west, got a receipt. Nope, got gas in cash. Crowley leaned forward. That's not an alibi. Marcus crossed his arms. What? You think I took her? You think I'd take my daughter, would you? Crowley asked calmly. Marcus stood up, chair scraping loudly. She's mine. I loved her. Crowley didn't flinch. Sit down. 2 hours later, Crowley interviewed the motel clerk, a teen with braces and a half-shaved haircut who spoke in rushed fragments. Yeah, he was here. Checked in Monday, same room, pays cash, stays off and on for weeks at a time. Anyone with him? The kid hesitated. One night, I think Tuesday, I saw a man who looked like him. Came in with a little girl. Crowley froze. You're sure? She was tiny, had a teddy bear, but they didn't stay long, just went into the room, then out the back way. You didn't think to call someone? I didn't know, man. She didn't seem scared. Did you hear her name? The kid shook his head. No, but the man, he was humming something, like an old lullaby, creepy as hell. Crowley drove back in silence, rain streaking the windshield. When he reached the station, he found Teresa, pacing the hallway, arms wrapped tight around herself. You said he had an alibi, she said. He says he was out of town, and we found a witness who saw a man that looked like him, with a girl carrying a teddy bear. Teresa's hands trembled. A teddy bear, he nodded. Could have been anyone. But it wasn't just anyone, she whispered. She collapsed onto the bench outside the interview rooms, shoulders shaking, face in her hands. I thought he was done with us, she whispered. I thought I got away. Crowley sat beside her but said nothing. Later, Crowley returned to room 207 to search for physical evidence. The key clicked in the lock, and the door creaked open. The motel room smelled of cheap cologne and wet cigarettes. On the nightstand sat a half-empty juice box. Next to an unopened pack of crayons, the sheets were tangled, the mirror smeared with handprints. He opened the closet. A small sock lay crumpled in the corner, pink with cartoon bunnies. He snapped on gloves, picked it up carefully, and dropped it into an evidence bag. In the bathroom, the mirror was cracked, and on the fogged glass above, the sink, faint but unmistakable, someone had scrawled, "I'm sorry." Back at the precinct, Teresa sat across from Marcus, separated by two guards and a tidal wave of history. Her voice was raw. If you know where she is, tell me. Marcus didn't look at her. She's your daughter, she cried. You said you loved her, he whispered. I do. Then where is she, Marcus? His eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw something. Flicker, pain, or guilt, or something darker. I didn't take her, he said, voice shaking. I swear, but someone's playing with us, someone who knows what. He leaned closer, eyes red. Knows what happened before. Teresa stiffened. What are you talking about? But Marcus shut down again. I'm done talking. Teresa stormed out of the room, breath heaving. Crowley caught up to her in the hall. Teresa, he knows something, she snapped. He's hiding something. He might be, but we don't have enough. There was a juice box in that room, crayons, a pink sock. Crowley nodded. It's being tested. What if he didn't act alone, she whispered. What if someone helped him, or worse, took her to hurt me? Crowley paused. Is there anyone else from your past who'd want revenge? Teresa blinked. The question landed like a cold slap. I don't know, she whispered. But Lily drew pictures once of a man with no face. She said he watched us at night. Crowley's jaw tightened. I need those drawings. That night, Teresa returned home for the first time since the abduction. The police had cleared the scene. The yellow tape was gone, but the house felt empty, like something vital had been ripped away. She walked into Lily's room slowly. On the floor, she found a crayon wedged between the bed and the wall. She held it like a relic, then looked up at the drawings on the bulletin board. Rainbows, stars, a sketch of a girl and a teddy bear, and one, taped in the corner, showed a tall figure standing outside a window. No eyes, no mouth, just a blank face. In Lily's childish handwriting beneath it, he watches us when Mummy sleeps. The house had quieted into a grave. The soft tick of the kitchen clock was the only sign that time still dared to move forward. Dust clung to the corners of the hallway like memories, refusing to fade. Teresa hadn't opened Lily's room in weeks. Not since the last detective had politely removed his shoes before stepping on her daughter's rug. As if courtesy could mask the failure to find her child. That afternoon, the autumn sun poured in through tilted blinds, washing Lily's room in faded gold. Teresa stood at the doorway for a long moment. Her hand hovered near the doorknob, And then, for the first time in months, she opened the door. The room was still undisturbed. The teddy bear was gone, of course. The toy had been taken in, for evidence, and never returned. But the rest remained intact, like a paused dream. A pink ribbon still hung on the dresser mirror. A crayon sun still smiled from the wall. Teresa stepped inside, feeling each breath in her throat like a stone. She pulled back the bed skirt on instinct, not expecting anything, not even sure what had driven her to clean. But then her hand touched cardboard, a shallow box, forgotten. Pushed far under the bed, she dragged it out with a strange mixture of dread and wonder. Inside were dozens of drawings. Lily's drawings, childish, colourful, some nonsensical, but one caught her breath. It was drawn in black crayon, as if someone had poured shadow across the page. A stick-figure girl stood beside a house with a window. Outside the window was a towering figure, all scribbled black, no face, just a rough, looming oval of smudged ink. In red crayon, a jagged smile. Beneath it, in a clumsy scrawl, "He watches me sleep." Teresa's legs folded beneath her. As she dropped to the floor, her heart pounded in her ears. The image burned behind her eyes. She laid out more drawings. In one, the same faceless man stood beside a tree with long arms. In another, he was reaching through the window, hand stretched toward the bed. Each page felt like a scream she hadn't heard in time. She stayed like that for hours, surrounded by crayon ghosts, until the sun dipped and the room darkened. Then she reached for a worn journal from the nightstand and began to write. What if she tried to tell me? What if the answers were always here? I should have seen it. I should have known. God, I can't breathe. Night crept in, and she didn't turn on the lights. Instead, she lit a candle. The flicker cast long shadows on the wall, and every movement made her flinch. She began rewatching home videos, searching Lily's laughter for codes, her bedtime songs for clues. Teresa played the same 30-second clip of Lily singing to her teddy bear again and again and again until the sound distorted into a mechanical echo. Her days became notebooks and nights became whine and whispers. She stopped answering the phone. She left groceries at the door. Friends stopped checking in. Even the officers reduced their visits. Grief had narrowed her world into a single room filled with paper and memory. One night, as rain beat against the window so similar to the night, Lily vanished. Teresa played an old cassette she found buried in a drawer. It had Lily's voice on it, singing, counting, laughing. Then, near the end of the tape, Teresa froze. There was a whisper, not Lily's voice. A man's low, close to the microphone. Breathy, she rewound it, heart racing. The voice was faint, but undeniable. It came just after Lily's giggle and before the tape ended. She leaned in. Good girl, don't tell. Teresa dropped the recorder. Her skin went ice cold. She stared at the wall, breathless. Something had always been there, and she hadn't seen it. The next morning, for the first time in nearly a year, she called the lead detective. Her voice was steady. I found something, she said. The recorder sat on the shelf, untouched. Teresa hadn't played it again since that cold morning 3 years ago when she made the call. The detective came, took the cassette, nodded solemnly, and left with a promise to look into it. But nothing ever came of it. Now, it was 1994. The news stopped running her daughter's name. The flyers were sun-faded, peeled off walls, shredded by wind and time. The box of drawings was back under the bed, and Teresa hadn't opened it in over a year. Life had marched forward without her. She was still in the same house, in the same routine, if it could even be called that. Days bled into nights. She forgot meals, forgot what she'd said or done the day before. She didn't answer the door anymore. The world had moved on. The house hadn't. Same dusty picture frames, same untouched pink shoes by the door, same silence. It was a Tuesday when the knock came. Sharp, confident. Not the delivery boy or the church lady or the neighborhood. Kids playing games. This one was different. Teresa stared at the door, uncertain whether to answer or hide. Then came a second knock. She opened it out of instinct more than decision, and was greeted by a young woman, no more than 25, with dark curls tucked behind her ears and a brown satchel slung over one shoulder. A notepad peeked out. "Mrs. Beck?" the woman asked, her voice gentle but rehearsed. Teresa nodded slowly. "I'm Clara Monroe. I'm a journalist with the Herald Post. I'm working on a story about unresolved cases in the region. I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk about Lily." Teresa blinked. The name hit like a match to dry leaves. "You're 3 years late," she murmured. "I know, but people forget too quickly. Maybe if they remembered again, something would come up. Maybe someone would come forward." Teresa studied her for a moment. She looked like someone who didn't know grief. Not yet, but cared enough to try. Her hand gripped the strap of her satchel like it was armor. "Why now?" Teresa asked. Clara hesitated. "Because I grew up 5 blocks from here. I remember the sirens that night. My mum wouldn't let me outside for weeks. I think I always felt like I owed it to her, to you." The words weren't perfect, but they were sincere. Teresa stepped aside. "Come in." The living room still smelled faintly of lavender and dust. Clara glanced around, taking it in, the quiet decay of hope. The clock ticked faintly in the background, and the air was thick, like grief had soaked into the walls. Teresa sat in the same chair she always did, her hands folded in her lap. Clara sat opposite, flipping open her notepad. "I don't want to cause pain," she began. "But sometimes talking pain's already here," Teresa said, flatly. "You don't cause it, you just shine a light on it." Clara lowered her eyes. "Can I ask about the night she disappeared?" Teresa nodded. She'd repeated the story enough times, it had become more script than memory. The balloons, the cake, the laughter, then the absence. The moment when reality split in two, before and after. Clara scribbled notes but was careful, respectful. After a long pause, Clara asked, "Do you think someone was watching her?" Teresa looked up sharply. "Yes, I think he'd been watching for a while." She stood suddenly and walked down the hallway. Clara remained in her seat, unsure whether to follow. A few minutes later, Teresa returned with the black crayon drawing. "The one with the man outside the window." Clara leaned in. "Is this?" She drew it weeks before. I didn't see it until after. Clara's breath caught as she traced the red crayon smile. "He has no face, he never did, not in any of them." Clara asked to take a photo. Teresa nodded. For the next hour. They talked not just about the case, but about what it meant to live inside a wound that never closed. Teresa spoke of birthdays passed with empty chairs, of voices that only existed in dreams, of the night she played the tape and heard the whisper. "Did the police ever do anything with that?" Clara asked. "They said the audio wasn't clear, said it could have been interference, a fluke, something about cassette warping, but you heard it." Teresa looked her in the eye. "I did." Clara scribbled again. Her hand was shaking slightly now. "What's your goal?" Teresa asked. Suddenly, "You want to write an article, then what? People read it with their morning coffee. Forget by lunch." Clara looked wounded, but didn't retreat. "I want to make people remember. You deserve that. Lily deserves that." The name still stung. Clara stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Would you let me come back? I think there's more here. I want to dig deeper." Teresa hesitated. "People have come before you, said they'd help, then vanished." "I won't," Clara promised. The door shut behind her, and for the first time in a long time, Teresa didn't return to bed. She stood by the window, looking out at the overgrown yard, at the shadow of the streetlight stretching toward the house. Something had shifted, not much, but enough. For a moment, Clara thought Teresa wouldn't move. She just stood there in the center of her dim living room, eyes unfocused, lips trembling. The room, much like Teresa herself, hadn't changed in years. Stale air, unopened. Curtains, a clock ticking softly in the background like a metronome of grief. "I asked them," Clara said again, her voice quieter now. "I asked the police to confirm if they ever listened to the teddy bear. The voice recorder. It's not in the report." Teresa's eyes flicked toward the hallway. toward the closet she hadn't opened in years. Her legs moved before her. Mind gave permission. Clara followed, careful not to step too loudly on the creaky floorboards. The hallway smelled faintly of old lavender and something else. Time, maybe. Teresa knelt slowly in front of the storage closet, fingers hesitating. On the brass knob, when she opened it, dust swirled like ash in the shaft of light. She pulled out an old plastic tub labeled Lily Toys. Her hands shook as she set it on the floor, flipping the lid. And there it was. The bear. Its soft brown fur had dulled to a sickly beige. One of its button eyes was missing, but the heart-shaped red patch on its chest where the voice recorder was hidden was still intact. Teresa didn't speak. She just held the toy like it might disintegrate. Then, after a long pause, she pressed the button, .click, .static, .a, mechanical, WHIRR, then silence. She tried again, .click, .static, .a, soft breath, then the whisper, a man's voice, low and intimate, barely audible, come with me, don't cry. Clara's skin crawled. Then came Lily's voice, faint, small, trusting. Okay. Teresa gasped and dropped the bear. It hit the floor with a dull thud, then rolled under the hallway table. She backed up until she hit the wall and slid down to the floor. Clara bent down and picked up the bear gently, her throat dry. Do you recognize that voice? Teresa covered her mouth with one hand. Her head moved slowly side to side. That isn't my ex-husband, she whispered. That isn't Marcus. Clara sat beside her. Teresa, you said Lily had the bear with her that night. She never slept without it, Teresa murmured. She talked to it like a friend. They sat in silence for a long moment, the kind that feels like a storm holding its breath. I buried this, Teresa whispered finally. I didn't just put it away. I made myself forget it existed. Clara looked at her. Why? Teresa pulled her knees to her chest. Because when I saw her window open that morning, part of me already knew I hadn't locked it the night before. I was tired. It was raining. I thought it would be fine. You blamed yourself. I still do. The bear let out another faint static click from Clara's lap, making both women flinch. I need to replay this, Clara said, standing up. I need a cleaner version. I have a friend who works in audio restoration. He can know, Teresa said. Sharply. Clara turned. I don't want it sent anywhere, Teresa said, her voice trembling. What if it gets lost? Or someone erases it? Clara nodded gently. Then I'll bring the equipment here. We'll do it together. Teresa's eyes met hers for the first time, fully present. You really believe this can help? I think it already has, Clara said. This is the first new lead in years. Later that night, Clara sat in her apartment. The bear in a Ziploc bag beside her. A labeled duplicate copy of the recording on her laptop. She didn't want to listen to it again, but she had to. She hit play, .click, .static, .the breath. The voice, come with me. Don't cry, Lily. Okay, she slowed the playback. Tried to isolate background sounds. There was a faint humming electrical, mechanical, something rhythmic. A hum that didn't belong in a child's bedroom. She scribbled a note, background. Noise, identify. Then she noticed something else. On the slowed playback, after Lily's voice, there was a tiny, almost imperceptible click. Like a door latch. Clara leaned back, heart pounding. The voice hadn't just been whispering, it had been leading, coaxing, familiar, enough to make a little girl trust it in the dark. She called her audio engineer friend, Miles. Can you bring your stuff to a location tomorrow? She asked. It's urgent. Whose voice are we chasing? He asked. Clara hesitated. I don't know yet, she said. The next morning, Teresa waited at the kitchen table, clutching a mug of tea that had long gone cold. The bear sat in front of her like a silent ghost. Miles arrived shortly after, lugging in a compact but professional setup. He didn't ask questions, just started working. He fed the recording through filters, stripped the static, enhanced background layers. Then, he leaned in, pressed his headphones tighter. There's more, he said, surprised. What do you mean? Clara asked, stepping forward. He isolated the last few seconds, a sound barely audible beneath the dialogue. It was music, old scratchy, like a music box, a faint twinkling lullaby tune that wasn't in her room, Teresa said, frozen. She didn't have anything like that. Clara's breath caught. Can you identify the tune? She asked Miles. He nodded slowly. I've heard it before. It's a nursery melody. Very old, European, I think. I'll dig deeper. He paused. The track dot, and that's when Teresa spoke, barely above a whisper. I've heard that before. Clara turned to her, where Teresa's face had gone pale. When Lily was 3, I took her to a daycare near Sycamore Street, just for a few months. The owner had this little music box in the nap room. It played the same tune. Clara's pulse quickened. Do you remember the name of the daycare? Teresa nodded, dazed. Little Belle's Nursery. The silence that followed was thick with realization. Clara looked at Miles, then at Teresa. It wasn't just a memory now, it was a path. The recording played again in the darkened studio, the silence between sounds feeling heavier than the audio itself. Click, static, a breath, come with me, don't cry. Then Lily's soft, trembling voice, okay. Teresa sat frozen beside Clara, her knuckles pale against her lap. Mr. Albridge leaned forward, eyes fixed on the shifting waveform. Glowing on the screen, the vocal imprint is subtle, but there, he muttered, pausing the playback. Male mid-30s to early 40s. Calm tone. No sign of force or panic from the child, which, frankly, is more disturbing than if there had been. Teresa exhaled shakily. She trusted him. Albridge nodded. Yes, whoever this man was, she didn't see him as a stranger. Clara scribbled notes in her leather-bound journal, the pages now dense with clues and contradictions. Can we match this voice to anyone? I'm running it through the National Offender Registry, Albridge replied, swiveling in his chair. But voice prints aren't as definitive as fingerprints. If he's never been recorded or arrested, we may never find a direct match. Teresa rubbed her temples. Could it be Marcus? No, Albridge said without hesitation. I analyzed a sample you brought from the custody hearings. Not the same cadence, not the same laryngeal tension. This isn't your ex-husband. That should have brought relief, but it didn't. If it wasn't Marcus, it meant they were chasing someone completely unknown, someone who had gotten close enough to her daughter to lure her away without resistance. As they left the studio and stepped out into the cold air, Clara turned to Teresa. Would Lily have gone with a teacher? A family friend? A neighbor? Teresa paused on the sidewalk, haunted. Lily was shy, but polite. She wouldn't have followed just anyone. Someone had to make her feel safe. The words lingered in Clara's mind long after they parted ways that evening. That night, she sat in her apartment surrounded by old case files she'd copied from the archives. She flipped through them again, her pen tapping against her lip dot. Then something caught her eye. A faded headline from a 1991 local paper. Family searches for missing daughter. 7. In Winford County, she froze. The photo was grainy, but the girl looked uncannily like Lily, same age, same build, same expression. Clara reached for another clipping. June 1992, Harmony Falls girl vanishes on way to church, and another. 1993, 7-year-old disappears. From picnic grounds, no trace left behind, each case different in details, but chillingly similar in outcome. All girls between 6 and 8. All vanished in small towns, all cases cold within 6 months. Clara's heart pounded. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. The next morning, she brought the findings to Teresa. The woman looked pale and exhausted, but her eyes sharpened as Clara laid out the clippings on the kitchen table. There's a pattern, Clara said, pointing different towns, different years, but always the same age range, always rural, and every girl had some connection. She trailed off. To what? Teresa asked. To a man no one seemed to really know. Clara flipped one article around. In the Winford case, there were mentions of a quiet handyman who helped at the school. In Harmony Falls, a neighbor recalled a friendly Bible volunteer who came by offering books for children. But in both cases, the descriptions were vague. No name, no photo, no record. Teresa swallowed. The man with no face. Clara nodded solemnly. He blends in, never draws attention, gains trust, then disappears. It's possible he changes identities. Teresa looked down at the crayon drawing she'd pinned to her fridge, the childlike sketch of a man. With a blank circle where the face should be. Lily saw him. She might have seen more than she realized. Clara hesitated. That recording, it didn't just catch the moment she was taken. It might have caught his voice. If we can find a match, any match, it could crack this whole thing open. Teresa stared at her, lips trembling. And, if we can't, then we keep digging. We follow the voice, the stories, everything. Later, that afternoon, they visited Harmony Falls, a 3-hour drive, with heavy clouds hanging low over the landscape. The town felt smaller than the map suggested. With peeling storefronts and rusting fences. They met with Rose Danning, the grandmother of the missing girl from 1992. Her eyes welled up the moment. Clara introduced herself. "You're not the first reporter to come by," she said, her voice brittle, but none stayed long. Clara explained the new connections they'd found. Rose listened, mouth slowly falling open. "My Maddie drew something before she vanished. A strange picture, of a man with no eyes. We thought she was just scared, of a Halloween costume or something." Teresa's breath caught. Clara leaned forward. "Do you still have it?" Rose nodded. "I keep everything." She returned with a yellowed drawing, a stick figure with broad shoulders, long arms and a featureless face. Teresa stared. "It's the same." Clara photographed it carefully. The puzzle pieces were finally connecting, but the picture they formed was monstrous. On their drive back, Clara sat in the passenger seat, her fingers tapping her chin. What if he's not gone? What if he's watching? Teresa gripped the wheel tighter. Then, he's seen too much. They drove on in silence, the forest looming on either side. The sun dipping below the horizon. In the back seat. Clara's recorder blinked red. Capturing the final line, Teresa whispered to herself, the beginning of a decision. "We find him. Or, I don't sleep again." The audio from the teddy bear still haunted Teresa's dreams. That whispered "come with me" had twisted into something deeper, darker. Clara noticed the change in her, a mixture of fire and fragility. But neither of them could stop now. The mystery had widened beyond Lily. Other girls, other towns, a chilling pattern no one had connected. Not until now. They were sitting in Clara's car outside the county records office when Clara's phone buzzed. Unknown number, she hesitated. "Answer it," Teresa said, barely above a whisper. Clara picked up. Clara Monroe, speaking. Young man's voice came through, shaky. "You, .. You're the one writing about the missing girl, Lily, right?" Clara straightened. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name's Derek Mason. I was at Pine Ridge Campground in June 1991. I saw a girl that looked just like her. I wasn't sure back then. I didn't say anything." Clara blinked. "Why now?" "Because I read the article. The part about the scar on her forehead, a breath. The girl I saw had the same scar. The next morning they met him. At a diner just off Route 6. Derek was in his late 30s now, with tired eyes and a fidgety demeanor. He kept stirring his coffee, but never took a sip. "I was 16 back then," he said. "Summer, before my junior year, my friends and I had this annual trip, campfires, cheap beer, bad ghost stories." He finally looked up. It was the second night, late. I'd gone to use the outhouse, and when I was walking back, I saw a man roasting marshmallows by a fire. A little girl was sitting next to him. He swallowed hard. She looked, ... hollow, you know, like something had been taken out of her. Teresa's hands clenched in her lap. "Did she say anything?" Clara asked. "No, she just sat there, blank face. But I remember the man, tall, wore this brown flannel jacket, smelled like gasoline or something. When he saw me, he smiled. Real friendly," said my nieces, first time camping. Teresa's voice cracked. "You're sure about the scar?" Derek nodded. "Left side, just above the eyebrow. I noticed it 'cause the firelight made it look red. Same shape as the one in the picture you published. Clara leaned in. Do you remember where exactly this campsite was? Yeah, north end of Pine Ridge. Site 32. It was kind of isolated. Did you ever report this? She asked. Derek stared down at the table. No, I didn't want to get involved, and ... Maybe I didn't want to believe what I saw. Teresa finally spoke. Was she wearing a red sweater? Derek blinked. Yes, with little white flowers on the sleeves. Teresa's breath caught. Her whole body froze. Bought her that sweater the week before she vanished. For a moment, no one spoke. Clara broke the silence. Derek, would you be willing to go with us to the site? He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I think it's time. They drove out that afternoon. The trees grew denser the farther they went, until the road turned to gravel, and the air felt heavier. Pine Ridge had long since fallen into disrepair. Half the sites were overgrown. The old ranger station boarded up, but the number signs were still nailed to trees. When they found Site 32, everything stopped. The fire ring was still there, blackened rocks in a loose circle. Moss crept up from the ground, and the remnants of an old tarp flapped weakly from a branch. Teresa stepped forward slowly, as if the air itself might break her. She crouched near the fire pit, her fingers hovering above the stones. Her gaze drifted to the tree line, dense, watching. She was here, she whispered. I feel it. Clara scanned the ground, her journalist's instinct flickering. Anything could have happened here. It's remote, unprotected, perfect place to disappear. Derek stood back, rubbing his arms. I remember the man looking up, like he heard something in the woods. Then he told the girl it was time to go. They packed up fast. Left within minutes. Teresa turned sharply. What time was this? Just past midnight. She closed her eyes. Lily was afraid of the dark. Clara pulled out her camera and began snapping photos. We need to find out who booked this campsite. Ranger logs, if they still exist. Credit card records, maybe. Someone had to sign in, Derek pointed. The check-in board used to be at the front gate. Paper logs, I think. Clara nodded. I'll dig into it. Teresa stayed behind as the others walked back, toward the car. She knelt by the fire pit again, fingertips brushing the dirt. A rusted marshmallow skewer lay half buried near a stone. She picked it up, her hands trembling. She was here, she said again, to no one in particular. Behind her, the wind rustled the trees, carrying the faint scent of smoke. Then she heard it, not loud, but unmistakable. A snapping twig. Her breath caught. She turned, heart racing. Nothing, just the trees. Still, she could swear something or someone had just been there. Teresa, Clara called, you coming? She stood slowly, the skewer still in her hand. Yes, she called back, but her eyes never left the woods. Something was waking up, something that had waited in the silence for years. The next morning, Clara sat across from the forensic audio technician, Mr. Elbridge, staring at the printed waveform of the whispering voice from Lily's teddy bear. The match had come back. Late the night before, a digital fingerprint clearer than anyone had hoped. Clara's heart sank when the name blinked on her computer screen. Ian Crowley, lead detective, trusted public servant. The man who had once reassured Teresa in her living room that everything that could be done was being done. Now, he was the man whose voice had lured Lily into the dark. Teresa didn't speak when Clara showed her the report. She sat motionless on the edge of the couch, one hand tightly gripping the base of her neck as if trying to hold herself together. Her lips moved silently, repeating his name. Then, suddenly, she stood up and walked out of the room, into the kitchen, and began vomiting into the sink. That afternoon, Clara drove alone to a small house just outside of town, past rows of maple trees and sun-faded, welcome fishermen signs. The home looked benign, modest, neat, quiet, Crowley's kind of place. She knocked once, no response, knocked again. The door creaked open. Mr. Crowley, she called, stepping cautiously inside. Know who you are. The voice came from the back room, familiar. Now, cold, steady, controlled. She followed the sound. The retired detective was seated in a high-back chair, pale light slicing through half-drawn blinds. The air smelled faintly of lavender and pipe smoke. A kettle hissed in the kitchen, unattended. "You've been digging," he said without looking at her. Clara nodded. Her recorder was already rolling inside her coat pocket. "I know what you did," she said. Her voice didn't tremble, though her hands did. Crowley finally turned to face her. The years hadn't taken away his poise. He looked at her like one might study a stranger, politely disinterested. "And what is it you think I did, Miss Monroe?" he asked. Clara held up the printed audio match. "You lured Lily out of her room. You were in her house. You knew her routine. You had access to evidence, and her mother trusted you." His eyes darkened, but his tone remained even. "She wasn't supposed to remember the bear, but she did," Clara said. "She recorded everything. That bear was her shield, and it just exposed you." Crowley leaned forward, clasping his hands, his knuckles white. "You think you're saving her memory. You think you're justice. You're a child with a match, playing in a room soaked with gasoline." Clara didn't blink. "Did you kill her?" The question hung in the air like fog, refusing to dissipate. Crowley didn't answer. Instead, he stood and walked slowly to the kettle. He poured 2 cups of tea, stirring one absent-mindedly before setting it in front of her. "You should let dead things stay buried," he said softly. Her skin crawled. "I'm not burying anything," Clara said. "But you will answer for this." He smiled, not cruelly, but wearily. "They'll never convict me. No prints, no witnesses, no motive. Anyone will believe." "But there's more than one girl, isn't there?" Clara pressed. "Lily wasn't the first." A pause. Then something shifted in Crowley's face, something that might have once been grief or shame, now worn down into hollow resignation. "I never touched her," he said at last, eyes staring into the windows. Reflection. "I took her. That part is true. But she was alive when I last saw her." Clara froze. "Then where is she?" He didn't answer, just turned toward a shelf beside his chair and ran his fingers along a dusty photograph, one that Clara couldn't quite see. "I told her she'd be safe. She wanted to believe me," he murmured. "They always do. They just want someone to say the right thing." Clara stood slowly, not taking her eyes off him. "You're going to give me names, other girls' places, something?" Crowley shook his head, as if disappointed. "You won't stop, will you?" "No," she said. "I won't." He looked at her then, really looked then. "You better be ready for what comes next." Clara turned and left the house. Outside, the wind cut through her coat like ice. She made it halfway to her car before her knees buckled. She leaned against the hood, breathing hard, the recorder still running. She rewound and replayed the moment he said, "She was alive when I last saw her." Alive. The word echoed like a bell struck in a cathedral. Clara didn't call Teresa right away. Instead, she drove back to the paper, locked her office door, and laid out everything they had on the board, from the first crayon drawing of the faceless man to the latest chilling admission. There were still too many blanks. Where did he take her? Why? And why, after all this time, had he spoken at all? Clara stared at a cluster of pins connected by red thread, all girls. Missing between 1989 and 1995. All from small towns. All under the radar. All with cases that had gone cold within months. Except Lily, because Lily had recorded his voice. Because a bear had been her secret guardian. Because Clara hadn't stopped. The phone rang. It was Teresa. Her voice was raw. "Remembered something," she said. From the night before Lily disappeared, Clara grabbed her notebook. "What is it?" There was a knock on the back door. Late. I thought it was Marcus, but when I opened it, no one was there, just a smell. Like wet wool. Clara's blood went cold. "And then what?" she asked. "I found Lily the next morning in bed, but she was holding a different bear. One I didn't recognize. I thought maybe a neighbor gave it to her, but now, ... Clara was already scribbling. That wasn't her bear, was it? No, Teresa whispered. It wasn't. Clara stood up, her heart racing. I need you to find that bear. If it's still somewhere in the house, don't touch it. I'll be there in an hour. She ended the call and packed her recorder, her notes, her files. Something told her, this bear, if it still existed, wasn't just a clue, it was the next breadcrumb, in a trail that had never really gone cold. For 3 days, the search warrant sat in legal limbo, filed, challenged, refiled while Teresa couldn't sleep. She sat curled on her couch, eyes vacant, the teddy bear clutched in her lap like a lifeline. Clara paced. She hadn't stopped since. Confronting Crowley, something in his tone haunted her. Not guilt, but ownership. When the call finally came through from the district judge, Teresa and Clara drove straight to the lake house with officers close behind. The sun was barely up, casting long shadows over the property nestled in woods that smelled like pine and rot. Crowley wasn't home. He was already in custody. The front door creaked open easily. The lake house looked abandoned, dust-heavy air, sheets covering furniture, and a half-finished mug of coffee molded into a green ring. One of the deputies, Ramirez, pointed to the basement stairs. There's a blueprint discrepancy, he said. A wall that shouldn't be there. The descent was quiet, more than quiet, oppressive, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Ramirez and another officer, Holt, used crowbars to pry away at the false wall behind an aging water. Heater wood splintered, drywall crumbled. Behind it, a steel door stood flush with the stone foundation. No knob. Clara asked, stepping forward. Deadbolts on this side, Holt muttered, like someone didn't want what was inside getting out. The door groaned open. The flashlight beams cut through thick darkness, landing on a room barely the size of a closet. And yet, it spoke volumes. Piled in one corner, tiny shoes, some paired, some not. A teddy bear with its eye sewn shut. A faded coloring book. Teresa stopped breathing. Then she saw it half covered by a moth-eaten towel. Lily's baby blanket. The one with embroidered lambs. The one she used to wrap around her daughter after bath time. No, the word barely escaped her lips. She rushed forward, arms trembling, and fell to her knees. Her hands reached for the blanket, but froze mid-air. As if touching it would confirm something too terrible to bear. Lily, she whispered, her voice breaking into shards. Oh God, my baby. Her scream came from a place that had been sealed just as tightly as the room. It cracked through the silence, primal and unrelenting. Officers turned away. Clara knelt beside her, but didn't touch her. There was no comfort to offer, not here. Ramirez shone his light to the back wall, where something had been scratched into the stone. Lily was here. The letters were small, uneven, a child's hand. Clara gasped, backing away a step. She was alive. After she vanished, she was alive long enough to scratch that. 1,000 questions screamed in her head. How long was she kept here? Was she alone? Why didn't anyone know? But the one that echoed loudest was the cruelest of all. Where is she now? The forensics team was called in, and the house cordoned off. Everything was bagged, each shoe, each crayon, even the fibers from the blanket. Teresa, wrapped in a foil blanket, stared blankly into the trees, while Clara sat beside her. Too numb to speak. Hours later, they were back at the station. Crowley sat behind a thick pane of glass, handcuffed, face unreadable. He hadn't asked for a lawyer, hadn't said a word. When Clara entered the viewing room, the DA leaned in and whispered, "He's playing silent. Nothing's connecting him." Yet to Lily's actual disappearance, possession of items, yes, but no proof of what happened inside that room. Clara's fists clenched. She wrote her name on the wall. That's proof. Circumstantial, the DA replied, weary. The law doesn't feel pain like people do. Teresa didn't go home that night. Clara took her in, fixed up the guest room with clean sheets and a nightlight. But Teresa stood in the hallway, staring at her reflection in the mirror. "Let him in," she said. Clara stopped. "You didn't know?" I let him talk to Lily, brought him tea, trusted him. Her voice cracked. He used my grief to get closer. There was nothing Clara could say to that. Later, alone, Clara opened her laptop and stared at the timeline she'd built. Red dots marked each girl who'd vanished across nearby towns. Dates, times, weather reports, all leading toward the lake house, all ending in silence. Except one, a girl named Maddie, from a town 30 miles east, had gone missing 2 years after Lily. She was never found, but the report said she'd been seen a week before near a small hardware store, talking to an older man with a limp. The clerk described him as calm, friendly, wore a fishing cap. Crowley had a limp. Fishing was his alibi. Clara's eyes widened. It didn't stop with Lily. She picked up her phone and called Ramirez. We need to reopen every missing girl case in a 50-mile radius going back to 1989. Jesus, Ramirez muttered. You think it was a pattern? I think Lily was the first, Clara whispered, heart pounding. But not the last. The circle of folding chairs was small, almost apologetic, in the basement of a church that smelled faintly of bleach and old paper. It was 1999 now, but for Teresa, time hadn't moved since 1991. She sat silently as a woman across from her recounted the last time she'd seen her missing brother. Others nodded, murmured support. Teresa didn't speak. She hadn't spoken at any meeting in over a year. She wasn't sure why she still came. Afterwards, the group shuffled out in ones and twos. A few nodded to her in kindness. She nodded back without really seeing them. The drive home was long and silent. The radio turned off, her thoughts louder than anything that could come through the speakers. She barely noticed when she pulled into her driveway, parked, and walked up the steps of the small rented house she now lived in alone. She moved like a ghost through the hallway, her fingers brushing the wall, as if to confirm she was still tethered to something. The teddy bear sat on a shelf in her bedroom, the same shelf, untouched for years. It had collected dust, its once bright pink fur now dulled to a muted grey. She wasn't sure why she picked it up that night. Something inside her chest ached. Tugged, she sat on the edge of her bed and held the bear. Her thumb pressed the small button sewn beneath its left paw. Click, static crackled. Then the voice, the one she'd heard before, come with me. Don't cry, Lily's tiny voice, okay. Her hand trembled, but she didn't stop it this time. She let it keep playing. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then came the part she had never heard. A faint mechanical skip, a breath of static, and then another voice, Mummy. The voice said, older, slightly deeper, no longer the babbling toddler Teresa had lost. Mummy, I still remember you. Her heart stopped. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. A cruel trick of her mind. But then came more. Another voice, not the man from before, softer, reassuring, don't cry, you're my good girl. Teresa's breath caught in her throat. She gripped the bear with both hands and pressed it to her ear, almost desperate to climb inside it. To crawl back into a moment she thought had vanished forever. Lily, she whispered, tears burning in her eyes. Are you still alive? She didn't sleep that night. The bear stayed clutched in her arms like a lifeline. Her mind raced with impossible questions. How had the recording changed? Was it ever truly linear? Could something have been triggered, a hidden track, or was someone tampering? By morning, she was in Clara's driveway. Clara opened the door, startled. Teresa. I need you to listen to something, Teresa said, her voice shaking. They sat at Clara's kitchen table, the bear between them. Teresa pressed play. Static, whisper, the same voice. Then the new message. Clara froze. That's not on any copy I made. I swear, I scrubbed every second of that tape. Teresa's face was pale, hollowed out with fear and a flicker of wild hope. It's new, or it was never unlocked before. Clara took the bear carefully and opened the stitching. Let's get this into the lab again. Maybe we missed something. Maybe this was part of the original. Teresa shook her head. Lily sounded older. Clara looked up slowly. Then it was recorded after she vanished. The room went quiet. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, and a branch scratched faintly against the glass like a warning. They didn't speak of it again that morning, not directly. But Clara called Mr. Albridge, the audio expert, and arranged for the bear to be examined again. She wanted new tests. Different ones. That night, alone in her house, Teresa sat on the bed again, her eyes vacant. If Lily had spoken after the disappearance, if that really was her voice, then someone had recorded her while she was still alive. Maybe still is alive. And the other voice. It wasn't Crowley, she knew that now. She'd listened too many times. This new voice didn't match anyone she knew, but someone else had taken her daughter. Someone who hadn't been caught. Someone who had somehow kept her close enough for her voice to be recorded. A ghost voice, rising through time. A new name, scratched at the back of her mind, a memory buried beneath years of grief and medication. She couldn't quite place it yet, but it would come because something else had awakened now, something that had been dormant since 1991. Hope, dangerous, addictive hope, and the terror that came with it. Rain tapped lightly against the window pane, like a hesitant knock that never quite made it through. Teresa sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor of Lily's untouched bedroom. A room preserved like a mausoleum, still painted in soft pastels and smelling faintly of baby powder. The teddy bear lay in her lap, its once vibrant bow now dulled. With time, and its stitched smile sagging under the weight of what it knew. She'd listened to the recording over and over for 3 days straight. Mummy, I still remember you. That was new. That part hadn't been there before. The recording had always stopped just after the giggle. But now, clear as glass, Lily's older voice, maybe 7, maybe 8, emerged from the static like a ghost pushing through fog. And then there was the second voice. A man's calm, almost sweet. Don't cry. You're my good girl. Teresa hadn't slept since. Her mind had detonated with possibilities. Crowley had been arrested, yes, but what if he hadn't acted? Alone, what if someone else had held Lily after him, raised her, lied to her? She took the bear to the FBI the following morning. Trembling the entire drive, Agent Kara Nguyen, a nonsense digital forensics expert from Quantico, handled the stuffed toy like it was sacred. Vintage voice box, common in the late 80s, she murmured, unscrewing the back with delicate precision. But this, this isn't factory standard. Someone modified this. Teresa's fingers dug into her purse strap. Modified how? Nguyen glanced up. It has a secondary chip layered under the original crude wiring, soldered by hand. The voice messages aren't random, they're layered like a journal. Someone used this bear to hide audio logs. Teresa's breath caught. You mean there's more? Nguyen nodded slowly. Possibly years of it. They scanned the chip. Hours of static, white noise, fragments of nursery rhymes, and then, voices. Faint, garbled, a child humming. The sound of rain, footsteps, silence, then more speech. I had a birthday today. The man brought me cake. It was pink. Nguyen's voice cracked for the first time. That's not a sick, drawled Lily, Teresa whispered, tears flooding her eyes. That's my daughter. She grew older. The recordings dated as late as 1996. 5 years after Lily's disappearance, the FBI reopened the case, formally that afternoon. News vans returned to Teresa Street like vultures circling again. Her mailbox overflowed with letters, some of support, some of accusation. Neighbors who once offered casseroles now whispered behind curtains. She ignored them all. None of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was the voice. Clara flew back from New York. Her journalism job on pause. She walked into her childhood home and hugged Teresa longer than she had in years. No words were needed. Together, they sat on the edge of Lily's bed and listened. He says my name isn't Lily anymore, but I don't like the new one. I want to go home. Is Mummy mad at me? Each sentence was like a needle, and Teresa felt her soul bleed in places she thought had already scarred over. Meanwhile, Agent Nguyen and her team traced the audio's environment. Background noise was analyzed. A faint train whistle suggested proximity to a rail line. The static had patterns, not just interference, but signal layering, as if recorded in a metal structure, possibly underground, possibly a bunker. Satellite maps were cross-referenced, with past reports, old compounds, closed mines, vacated cabins. Leads surged and evaporated like smoke. Teresa waited, clung, hoped. But the trail grew cold again, and, as weeks became months, the story faded from the headlines. People moved on, again. Crowley died in custody from a heart attack before trial. No confession, no closure. His secrets rotted with him. But Teresa couldn't move on. Not when the last known version of her daughter lived in echoes. One grey evening, she returned to Lily's room, the only place she still felt anything. She picked up the bear, clicked the worn playback button, and let her daughter's fading voice fill the silence. He doesn't like when I cry, but I cry anyway, because I know you're looking for me. Teresa crumpled to the floor. The FBI had done all they could. No location had been confirmed. No DNA, no sightings, no trace. Just a voice, and a mother who refused to forget it. She rocked slowly now, cradling the toy as if it were Lily herself. Her grey-streaked hair brushed the bear's threadbare ears dot in the corner. A mobile still hung over the crib, motionless. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window pane once more. The door to the room creaked open. Clara stood there, older, worn by years of sorrow and journalism and second-hand grief. She held an envelope. It came today, she said softly. From New Mexico, unmarked. Teresa looked up, eyes hollow. Clara stepped forward and placed the envelope in her mother's. Lapped up inside. A photograph, a girl, maybe 16, sitting on a wooden bench, smiling, but her eyes distant. A familiar scar traced her right temple. On the back, in shaky handwriting, she still hums that same lullaby. Teresa's fingers trembled as she turned the photo again. Her heart screamed. She pressed the teddy bear against her chest and whispered to it like a prayer. I'm still here, baby. I'm still here. And in the hallway, Clara dialed the FBI. We have something. Or someone. Fade to black. The voice in the dark was no longer just a ghost. It was a thread, and they were ready to pull it.